yourselves. So my name is Nancy Lichtenstein, and I am a judge on the Colorado Court of Appeals.
I am Brian Sevier, and I am the Director of Standards and Instruction for the Colorado Department of Education.
And I'm Ann McGeehan. I'm a former state legislator. This was my committee room, so be respectful. This is one of them, and I currently practice law.
You can introduce yourselves.
Hi, I'm Emily Neff. Hi, I'm Simone Michelle. Hi, I'm Sierra Cadden.
Great. And can you introduce your teacher to us as well?
Jeff Ryan is our teacher
Wonderful.
coach.
Well, thank you so much.
And thank you, everybody, for coming.
I know this is a lot of hard work, but I want you guys to have fun. All right. Okay, so we will be doing question number 3.
So question number 3, what was the Great Compromise, and why was it such a contentious issue at the Philadelphia Convention? Evaluate this argument advanced at the time of the convention. In the House of Representatives, the states are represented in proportion to their inhabitants. Here, the separate interests will operate with their full force, and the violence of parties can be restrained and quieted only by a body of men less local and dependent. Also evaluate this counter-argument currently being advanced. The Great Compromise guaranteed that the American constitutional system would forever fall short of the one-person, one-vote rule that is the defining norm of modern democracy, simply because the accident of their residence in less populous states gives them a bigger political bang for the electoral buck.
So you may begin.
55 sweaty men convened in one room in the middle of summer with no air conditioning during the Philadelphia Convention. Not surprisingly, the debate was contentious. The only topics the framers agreed on were that the Articles of Confederation were ineffectual and that America needed a more powerful central government. Madison identified the controversy between large and small states in his convention notes. During 1787, the great difficulty lies in the affair of representation. All others are surmountable.
Edmund Randolph's Virginia plan presented a bicameral legislature based on proportional state representation, so each state was represented differently. In contrast, William Patterson's New Jersey plan suggested a unicameral state legislature based on equal state representation. As Madison wrote in his July 16, 1787 notes, a division was unavoidable. Each state, according to its size, supported the plan that tended to its particular needs.
Neither side was completely satisfied as the Great Compromise tried to appease all states. Connecticut's Roger Sherman proposed a bicameral legislature with one chamber composed of delegates based on state population size and the other based on equal state representation. James Madison is named the father of the Constitution, but he opposed the Great Compromise, claiming in his July 14, 1787 notes, the proper foundation of government was destroyed by substituting inequality in place of a proportional representation. Despite much argument, the Great Compromise passed by a slim one-vote margin. Thus, Article 1, Section 2 established a House of Representatives directly elected by the people for a 2-year term, meaning people's short-term needs must be considered as representatives regularly report back, seek re-election. But this means representatives of the House occasionally act impulsively. For example, the English Language Empowerment Act of 1996 proposed all persons in the U.S. communicate with members of the government in English. This bill, which reflected an anti-immigrant bias, would have denied some citizens the ability to communicate with their elected representatives. It passed in the House with a vote of 259 versus 169, but died in the Senate. The founders believed that potential for impulsive lawmaking must be balanced by a less passionate, more independent Senate. Until the 17th Amendment was ratified in 1913, senators were elected by state legislatures, a step removed from the people, as provided in Article 1, Section 3. Even after the 17th Amendment, senators remain less local and independent. They still hold 6-year terms and represent entire states containing many values and so often act less radically. For example, the liberal organization That's My Congress rates all members of Congress on a 100-point scale. This organization gave Colorado's Representative Mike Coffman a 6 and Democratic Representative Jared Polis a 75. But Senator Mark Udall received a more neutral score.
Because senators represent a larger constituency, they are often more centrist. In contrast, the localized nature of the House often yields a more passionate and factious team.
On the other hand, equal representation in the Senate, mandated by Article 1, Section 3 of the Constitution, undermined Publius's notion in Federalist 22 that a Republican government requires that the sense of majority should prevail because the Senate divides power equally between states. For example, California's population of 38 million receives the same 2 votes in the Senate as Wyoming's 500,000 residents. Thus, a citizen of Wyoming has around 75 times the voting power in the Senate as a Californian.
This also means that smaller states often receive more federal spending per capita than larger states. For instance, according to the New York Times, Alaska receives about $20,000 in federal spending per capita, double the national average. Federal funds also often go to small state projects like the $223 million Geneva Island Bridge of Alaska to obtain votes needed for the passage of bills. In this instance, the Senate ironically embraced equal representation yet failed to equally represent the people. We are now ready for your questions.
All right, please put away your note cards. Talk about this beginning, but I'll just start with a question. All right, I'm just curious, what do you think about the advantages of 2 houses of Congress and disadvantages? And give me some contemporary examples.
I think the presence of 2 branches really allows for a lot of discussion amongst the legislative branch before a bill is passed. For example, recently, the Senate has approved a bill that would ban anti-gay discrimination in the workplace, and I believe that because in the House it's going to be discussed, and Senator Boehner has not guaranteed its passage, and Speaker Boehner, it allows a lot of discussion and ensures that the people are being represented and our needs and our wants are being reflected in government.
I think it's not only valuable to look at the discrepancy that there's 2 houses, but also it's valuable to look at there's one equally represented and one proportionally represented. Back to your question, a modern example would be of the Northern Colorado secession. 11 of 64 districts are attempted to secede, and according to Phillips' plan, they would like to propose a plan for 2 senators per county. But this because right now both houses in Colorado are proportionally represented.
I think Emily brought up a really good point. The bicameral system is that much more useful in that one has equal representation, one has proportional representation. Polybius wrote in Federalist 62 that this prevents improper acts of legislation from being passed, and that has to first go through a majority of the states and then a majority of the people. The modern example of this would be the farm bills that are currently being discussed. Unsurprisingly, with the House being mostly Republican, they want to make bigger cuts to crop subsidies, but the Senate wants to make smaller cuts, and so they kind of moderate each other. In a way, though, this is a disadvantage in that it can cause inefficiency because it requires that much discussion when we might need to come to a decision about something.
You all have talked a great deal about the Great Compromise, and I'm wondering who led which side and which side had what victories when they made that compromise?
So we see the leader of the idea of the New Jersey plan was William Patterson. He was also supported by Mr. Pinckney, also a representative from a smaller state. And so these 2 representatives, they seeked their desires were that the Articles of Confederation be amended, not scrapped and rewritten as the Virginia plan has presented, and then they also desired that coercive power, which means that the federal government can force states to do something. This is somewhat implied in the supremacy clause of Article 5. Yeah, Article 5, and so that view that they wanted was seen reflected in the government, and they succeeded in that.
I'd like to add that neither side was not always victorious. There was also some other compromises made in the Great Compromise, such as the discussion of slavery, which is what made the Philadelphia Convention so contentious. The word slavery never appears in the Constitution. That's how contentious it was. And we see in Article 1 of the Constitution that they can't prohibit the importation of slavery until the year 1808, which they're putting it off because they could not decide on what to do.
Were you asking just about the Great Compromise or compromises in general during the convention?
I was asking about the Great Compromise, but feel free to expand.
I might also add the Commerce Compromise. The northern states, they wanted for tariffs to be able to be put on traded goods in order to protect them from foreign competition. The southern states, they didn't want that though because they were worried that it would hinder their trade and thus harm their economy. The compromise though was that tariffs were only put on imports, not exports. So everyone won a little, everyone lost a little in that sense.
So you talked a little bit about compromise, sort of kicking the can or the problem down the road. So sometimes compromise can compromise end in pushing difficult problems off to the future. And what kinds of examples or evidence can you cite to support that argument?
So like Emily had said, they did push off discussion of stopping the importation of slavery till 1808, and then that created a lot of issue then, which eventually the built up tension from that discussion, because they did decide to stop the importation of slavery, but the amount of slaves in America had already been at such a point where the increase alone would provide enough. And so the tension created by that decision and those discussions eventually led to the Civil War, which was a great conflict.
I have a question. In 1913, I think you mentioned that they changed how we elect senators. What brought that about?
We see this was during the Progressive era, which means it was a very middle-class oriented movement. They wanted the people to be represented, and they wanted to have their voice heard in government. And this was the time with Teddy Roosevelt and a lot of very progressive era, middle-class, prohibition, this era. And so this era very much called for the Senate to be closer to the people and not as distant as it was originally.
Also, in creating the Constitution, Anti-Federalist Paper 60 criticizes that the Senate is a group of men where the rights of many are preferred to the interests of many are preferred to the rights of the interests of the few are preferred to the rights of the many, is the quote from it. So they knew that the Senate either way would be a group of elite men, but having the ability to elect them makes them a step closer to the people.
All right, thank you very much. Well, so now we're going to give you guys a little bit of feedback here. So I will start actually.
It was really a pleasure to listen to all three of you. I loved the start, and it drew a picture for us of where we were when the Great Compromise occurred. You were all very energetic, and you own the room. That's what I've been telling other people. You're going to be in this room all day, own it, and you three really own the room very nicely. So I say a job really well done.
Thank you. And I'll have to echo that. I mean, you really gave the feel of what was going on with the compromise, and I think it only passed by one vote, as far as I understand. I mean, my goodness. I mean, and our country was really teetering on were we going to work or not, and to see how far along we've come in modern day. And then I really enjoyed how you did bring out the contemporary examples. And I did like how you did clarify, was the question this, because you did have something to add. I thought it was a polite way of handling it. You may have been just talking about the Great Compromise, but I have something to add here. I liked how you drew on historical facts, on constitutional facts, and I liked how you pulled out of each other's answers to questions. So I thought it was a very nice job.
Thank you.
I agree. I think you guys did a great job. I like the way you all evenly sort of participated, and you all sit there very poised, and you didn't stare at your notes. You actually looked up at us, which is great. I like the interesting mix of the examples you brought, and some of them I would have never thought of to bring into this argument, but I thought it was phenomenal the way you brought in Colorado secession ideas and in a really interesting way. And so I thought you guys did a great job. Keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Yeah. And the only thing I would add, at some point, I know you're limited on time. At little times it seems fast and rote. You know, really think about what you're saying, and just, you know, like I'm talking to you right now, like, you know, I want to talk to you, and, you know, just talk to us that way too. And just I mean, you guys are great with your presentation, but I think sometimes when you are getting in that rote thing, just really think about what you're saying.
Or when you can't, when you can't feel yourself breathe, that's when you're going to.
All right, great job.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.